welcome to episode 3 of season 5 of What We Read. I will never stop saying this season because apparently I cannot fathom being 5 seasons in.
And yet here we are.
And yet here we are. Alright, we're gonna go right into it. The first book I'm going to talk about is From Little Tokyo with Love, which is by Sarah Kuhn. I have not read anything else by this author, although she's done quite a few things that I'm interested in reading. From Little Tokyo with Love appealed to me in particular because the love interest is Filipino. So, you know, Filipino-Chinese, if I remember correctly. Anyway, the story centers around main character Rika, who has never really felt like she fits in with the rest of her family, who all live in Little Tokyo. Rika was adopted by her aunts when she was little. She feels like she doesn't have a place there. She feels more like the monster in a fairy tale than the princess in a fairy tale.
Interesting.
Up until the day that she suddenly realizes that Hollywood star Grace Kimura, who is famous for being like an Asian American rom-com lead in the Hollywood scene, might actually be her mom. Oh. And so partnering up with this budding actor Hank Chen, who actually worked with Grace on a project, she decides to do her best to track Grace down and find out the truth. Along the way, uncovers that there are things about herself that she needs to come to terms with, and things about the people around her that she also needs to understand. And I honestly was not expecting to be as moved by this book as I was. It is definitely not going to be the last book that I read from Sarah Kuhn, because the way that she managed to spin this one to make it feel like a modern day fairy tale, and not even in the traditional sense. It's not just a girl looking for her mom and hoping to be reunited. It's not just a girl who becomes a princess magically at the end of the day. No, this is a girl who is looking for a place to belong to and someone to belong to. And it really tugged on my heartstrings to see Rika struggling with that, especially because she attributes a lot of her having no place to the way she is as a person. Right. So it's a very emotional journey. I love that the story combines a lot of very heartwarming, very emotional moments, but also moments like movie magic. I call them movie magic because it's like, this feels like it would happen in a film.
Cool.
It could happen in real life, but the likelihood of that is pretty low. It's like...
It's very filmy.
Unless all the stars align. Which rarely happens in real life.
Rarely.
I love how it wrapped up by the end. It gives you a happy ending, but it's not, you know, like the happily ever after that is traditional in a fairy tale or in a movie.
Sure.
Really, really enjoyed that. It was such a lovely book to actually read, and I'm glad that I finally read my first Sarah Kuhn and would definitely look forward to reading more from this author.
Awesome.
The next book I'm going to talk about is a romance novel, and it is Life's Too Short by Abby Jimenez. This is the third book in her series, The Friend Zone.
Okay.
And I have read and enjoyed the first 2 books. The second book so far was my favorite, and I still think that it remains my favorite. This one is about... Well, the way it connects to the others is that the love interest, Adrian, he is the cousin of the main character's love interest in the first book. Adrian is this hotshot lawyer, and one night he and his girlfriend are awoken by the sound of the next door neighbor's apartment because there is a baby wailing in there and the walls are pretty thin. And so he ends up, you know, getting up and going next door, offering to help the person who lives there with the baby. Turns out that he's never met this neighbor before. Her name is Vanessa. She is actually a well-known YouTube personality because she films videos talking about and raising funds for, I believe it's ALS. Because it's a genetic version of the disease, it's sort of her trying to raise money for it, but also going on a journey with it because she thinks that she's going to get ALS. And she has ended up with a baby because her sister got pregnant, had the baby, and then the sister left the baby with her, and so now she's gonna take care of the baby. And so Adrian and Vanessa meet in the most unlikely way, but they end up getting very close to each other because Vanessa could use the help. And not only is she parenting this baby, she's also basically taking care of her entire family because everyone has some kind of problem. And Adrian fits right into this scenario because he's the kind of person who will go out on a limb to help people. That's just who he is. And so the two get closer and closer, but obviously the impending, looming, possible diagnosis that Vanessa is going to get is going to be part of what drives them apart, as well as Adrian's own personal struggles. And much like her other novels, this has a lot of charm. It has a lot of sweet romantic moments, also a lot of funny lines. I love that we get cameos from the characters in the other books. That was actually one of my favorite parts of this one. And I really enjoyed seeing Adrian and Vanessa's romance develop. I realized that a lot of what I like about Abby Jimenez's stories is that the situations that the characters are in often require them to spend a lot of time together in isolation, where it's just the two of them in one location, and I think that happens here. Of course, there's a baby and a dog in this one, so I mean, you know, sure, yeah. Extra presence, but it was just delightful to read. It made me happy, and even though the ending was a little dramatic, a little over the top really, what can you expect with the scenario set up the way it was. And it has a lot of also the same movie magic vibes to the ending. I still really liked it. I thought it was really fun to read. It did make me sad to read about what Vanessa was going through, because it was very difficult on all fronts, not just her fear of an impending diagnosis, but also everything she's had to deal with her entire family. And it made sense for them to come up against bumps in the road in their relationship on their way to a happy ending. So definitely enjoyed Life's Too Short. I still think the second book, The Happy Ever After Playlist, is probably my favorite of this particular series, but this one was very, very good. So
cool.
Highly recommend checking it out as well. The next book I'm going to talk about is not out until August, and I feel a little bad talking about it so early, but the instant that this book got, I got access to the book, I was like, nope, can't read anything else. Can't read anything else. And I've done this with every other book in the series. So the book is The Heart Principle by Helen Huang, which I have been waiting for a very long time for. And yes, it's because the love interest in this book is Kwan, who we have met in The Kiss Quotient, which is the first book in Helen Huang's series. So The Heart Principle is about Anna and Kwan. Kwan has just had a surgery to deal with, well, not just had, he's had a surgery to deal with a form of terminal illness that he had, and it's kind of left him feeling a little bit, I guess, less confident than he used to be. Because in the first two books, you kind of see him and he's very confident, he's very outgoing, he likes the ladies, it's a thing. And in this book, he feels a little self-conscious. But at the beginning, he decides that he's gonna try again, like he just has to get back on the horse and ride it. Cue Anna. Anna is in a committed relationship, except that at the beginning of this story, her boyfriend is like, you know, since we've been together for so long, before we get married, let's try seeing other people to make sure that this relationship is what we want. So they're in an open relationship. Anna decides that, okay, I'll do exactly what this boyfriend tells me to do. And this is...
as one does.
Yeah, so she gets on one of the apps on the phone and, you know, swipe right, swipe left. She ends up meeting Kwan through this app. And the thing is, Anna is not just dealing with this relationship fallout. She's also dealing with her own sort of individual struggle with her music. Something that had used to be so dear to her and so easy to her, it felt like almost breathing or a form of expression. She's actually struggling with it these days. She and Kwan hit it off. They become friends. They also sort of become something more. Things kind of come to a head when... Specific plot spoiler ahead. Skip to 740 if you don't want to know specifics. Anna's dad had a stroke, and he's basically in a comatose state. Anna, her mom, and her sister, they become the basically full-time caregivers for the dad. Who... Specific plot spoiler is done. You can resume watching right now. This story was actually a lot heavier than I anticipated it would be. Which is not to say that the other two didn't have their own difficult things for the characters to deal with. But this one in particular not only deals with Anna struggling to figure out like how to make it clear to the rest of her family that this is not what her dad wants. She's also trying to overcome her own anxiety, which she eventually gets, you know, answers about that at some point in the book. And then there's the whole thing, the relationship thing. There's a lot of different heavy topics in this one, and it's funny to say it, I don't feel like it's the right thing to say I enjoyed them, but I feel like because I could relate on some level to a lot of it, I was like, oh, this feels weirdly like being seen, and I did not know what to do with that the entire time I was reading the book. I can't really express, even until now, it's been like a few weeks since I read the book, like even until now I find it hard to really express how the resonance affected me, because I think in a lot of ways this is not one where I can easily be like, oh yeah, definitely read Helen Huang's new book. It's like light and good, and like the romance is great. The romance is great, by the way. The caregiving part is such a big aspect to it, and then that part is very, very heavy. And the entire story itself is written in a way that feels really honest and personal, and I think Helen Huang has said it online, and there's also a note before, like at the end of it as well, where she says, you know, she had to sort of write her way through this one, and a lot of it mirrored her own creative journey where she felt like she had burnt herself out. It was definitely something. It was different from the other two, but that wasn't a bad thing. It kept me captivated enough that I just read it all in one sitting. I think it's a really good book. I do think that if you go in expecting something like The Kiss Quotient or The Bride Test, that's not essentially what you're going to be getting. You're going to be getting something a little different, definitely heavier. But in my opinion, it's really a testament to Helen Huang's ability to tell a story and to bring characters to life, because she had me hooked from the beginning, and I was willing to go through everything with these characters, no matter how painful or difficult those things might be. I would still say that if you want to check out The Heart Principle, you definitely should. If you are a Helen Wong fan, I think you're still gonna really like this book. It's gonna definitely hit you different than the others. This one has a lot of content warnings though. I put them all in my Goodreads review, so I'm just gonna link that down below so you can see it. But definitely go in knowing some of these things. I feel like there are certain things that maybe other people are not gonna have as easy a time reading, so you might wanna check those out. I think it's time for us to roll on over to Mackie for a short, brief break. What a sad note to end on though.
Well, you know, life. I, on the other hand, read a couple of trilogies, I want to say, and we're going to start off with the Black Widow sort of like trilogy for 2014.
Okay.
This is the one by Nathan Edmondson. His run, just for about three volumes, are Finely Woven Thread, Tightly Tangled Web, and Last Days. It reads like a really cool spy movie, which is what you are supposed to expect in a Black Widow story. I find that I just particularly love that the flavor of this particular spy story is that it's the Black Widow, so it's set in that world. It's got some Avengers involved. Bucky is in it as a lovely surprise, and
that is a lovely surprise.
I do love, and there was a real sort of like thing between Sergeant Barnes or whatever his title was and Natasha, and to have the aftermath of, I mean, obviously it didn't work out, but to have that in context, and it wasn't a bad breakup either, to have that in context and to still see that they sort of watch each other's backs. He only appears a little later towards the end, but this is the kind of story where this is the kind of Black Widow story you want. You want to capitalize on the fact that she is gray morally. You want to capitalize on the fact that she has a very long past, arguably as long as the Winter Soldiers. And that's why they got together in the first place, but it's sort of in the past. And to have those have ramifications, ghosts and skeletons in the closet, and to be in a world where Natasha has nobody to rely on except herself, and to you know, sort of like make her pay for the people, you know, for the few bonds that she does have, is the quintessential Black Widow sort of like formula. And I like that they took all of those elements. I like that Nathan Edmondson sort of like took us on that particular journey. I enjoyed it. It wasn't the greatest thing ever, I would like to say, so I did give it like sort of like 4 stars overall. But the experience is, it's gourmet Black Widow. I like it. It's very, very nice. So I highly recommend it to anybody who wants a casual Black Widow read, I want to say. It's not, I feel like it's not maybe the best offering of this is the definitive Black Widow story. No, it's one of the things that she's, it's like if you look at the five months that this story sort of spans, you're like, that totally happened to Natasha. Like, you just know. So there's that. Jessica Jones making a comeback in 2016. This is the Brian Michael Bendis run. 3 volumes. Uncaged, Secrets of the Secrets of Maria Hill, and The Return of the Purple Man. So Brian Michael Bendis of Brian Michael Bendis fame. Google him, he's easily Googleable. He's probably written a bunch of the stuff that you like if you like comics. He takes the Alias Investigations Jessica Jones. And this is, again, for those of you who don't know, Jessica Jones was a B-grade hero in like the early days. She I think her superhero name was Jewel, and she was in like a white spandex type deal.
You've shown me that.
And like a pink wig. It was they
super even did that in the Netflix series.
Yeah, it was super. Yeah, they referenced it a little bit, but things take an incredibly dark turn for her when this terrible villain called the Purple Man, who has the ability to do mind control. Just basically, and he's a psychopath. Like, he's just a sociopath. Like, he's just a psycho. Enslaves her for a long period of time, several months. And what comes out of that survival of that particular, you know, terrible person, whatever, is this sort of like hard-boiled detective noir type woman where she's like, I will just help people. It's just I won't do the superhero thing. So she still can't fly. She's a terrible drunk. She's a terrible human. She's just like and so Kristen Ritter plays her really, really well on Netflix. And the Netflix series came about because Marvel Max at the time, which is sort of like the R18 sort of like, you know, rated Marvel stuff where all the cursing and the, you know, like the sex and the drugs and the violence can be drawn, right? So it's not sanitized for children. Jessica Jones had a run in a series called Alias Investigations where she ran the agency. And she kind of hooked up with Luke, all that kind of stuff. She becomes an Avenger at that point in time, but then Brian Michael Bendis' run brings that back. And I love the grittiness of it. It's not quite as gritty and dark as Alias, but Jessica is back in fine form. Like, she is running her mouth and getting in trouble and getting the crap beat out of her and beating the crap out of other people and getting in jail and getting out of jail. It's this wild thing. And to have the first arc center around her terrible consequences of her actions, how it affects her life with Luke, and they have a baby. In the second volume, on the aftermath of her cleaning up the pieces, as though things weren't shattered enough, Maria Hill comes along and hires her to do a job. And Maria Hill, for those of you who don't know, had Luke arrested at one point in time. Just in front of her and the baby. So she's like, why are you here? So it was such a great foil. And she just had to help. And then finally, of course, the Return of the Purple Man. That was some crazy, like that
I feel
brought,
like that one's gonna be wild.
That brought back the fear of the helplessness that the Purple Man can do. Because ultimately, Jessica Jones, her storyline, if you really want to mine it, it is a psychological thriller.
Yeah.
Because what would you do about
accurate.
a person who can control the minds of anyone, everyone in your life could be weaponized against you, and he's a psychopath. Like, this is not Professor Charles Xavier, who's just problematic, and he is. But with the Purple Man, he is a grade A sociopath. Like, he has no morals, and he has that kind of power, and he has abused it time and time again. And Jessica was the one point of fascination that was ultimately his foil. It was great to sort of harken all of that back. Again, it is not the definitive Jessica Jones story, but I like that it echoes the definitive Jessica Jones experience.
Alright, we're going to talk about 2 middle grade books now, which
Lovely.
is a little bit of a departure. The first one is When Life Gives You Mangoes by Karine Guedin.
Oh.
This is the story of a young girl named Clara. She lives on an island that most visitors consider exotic, but for her, it's just her everyday life. The thing is, she can't remember what happened to her last summer after this big hurricane hit the island. Like, she has no memory of it. And even though people tried to fill in the blanks for her, she's still like, this is not fitting exactly right, because obviously it's some other person's impression of what happened and not necessarily what she actually remembers. However, this summer everything is going to change because a new girl comes to town, and that kind of jumpstarts a whole new journey for Clara. And I listened to this one because I had seen it on Instagram. I think Sins from Book of Sins is the one who recommended it. And I was really surprised because I really like this story. I tend to enjoy middle grade stories where the main character is struggling with something very specific. And in this story, that's exactly what is happening with Clara. Not only is she struggling with the memory loss, but she's kind of on rocky terms with her best friend, Dana. And like, she also has like complicated feelings about, you know, being on the island and the things she used to like to do. It's a whole mess of emotions, and the story just is about her unraveling pieces and pieces and pieces of the story, all jump-started by the arrival of this new person on the island. And my goodness, I was so surprised. I honestly didn't know much going into it, except for the fact that, you know, she lived on an island, she didn't have her memories. But as it all unfolds or ends, I was like, whoa, did not see any of that coming whatsoever. And it was really, really well done. I think the writing was brilliant. I think the author really captured Clara's voice in a way that made Clara feel like someone I actually knew in real life, which I appreciated a lot. I enjoyed the setting as well, because it's very rare apparently for me to read things that are not set in urban places or fantastical realms. I like island settings, which I tend to forget for some reason, but I do like them a lot, so it was fun to like sort of be on the island with Clara and the kids of her generation, and to just sort of see what their experiences of growing up there were like. I listened to this one on audio, which was also a really good choice. I think the narrator did a very good job, just, you know, with all the voices and the storytelling and the narrative style, so definitely would recommend checking that out. Another book that was actually also a harder middle grade to listen to is Everlasting Nora, which is by Marie Miranda Cruz. This is actually about a young girl named Nora. She and her mother live in Manila Cemetery.
Oh.
They're squatters there after a fire burned down their house. She also lost her dad in the fire, so they have no choice but to live in the mausoleum where his remains are. So they squat in Manila Cemetery, and their goal is to one day make enough money for them both to go to Davao, where her mom's brother lives. It's an everyday struggle for Nora and her mom, except that one day her mom doesn't come home.
Oh, no.
And so Nora is kind of left to fend for herself, but also to try and figure out where her mother has gone, because she knows her mother would never leave her. And it kind of reveals that there is a sort of darker community that her mother has somehow gotten herself tangled in. And so Nora is forced to face a lot of very difficult things in this story. But it does end with Nora realizing that, you know, she was so adamant about separating herself from everyone else who had the same circumstances as her, but at the end of the story she realizes that in some miraculous way she and her mom have managed to build a sort of community of supportive people around them. Because nice. that is the ending of the story, people coming around and rallying to help them.
That's lovely.
It was really hard to listen to, and a part of that is because I've seen these things for myself. Like, I haven't experienced what Nora experienced, but seeing these things for himself and then seeing them
that could
talked
totally,
about in a book,
yeah.
It was so hard because I'm just like, there's still people who live like this. There are still people whose
That's
everyday experience is like this, and it made me so sad to just hear this story narrated, even though it does have that thread of optimism and hope in the various relationships that Nora and her mom both realize that they actually have that are supportive and loving. Like, it's a combination of like circumstantial situations that made me feel heartbroken, but also like the familial dynamics that Nora and her mom experience with their extended family. Very difficult things to hear and read about.
It's all very real, apparently.
Yeah, I think it was the first time in a long time where I had read a Filipino story in a Filipino setting, and to see that captured so well was both amazing, because it's like that's a feat, obviously, and it's great that other people who pick up this book will get that perspective, but on the other hand, it was also so harrowing and heartbreaking, and I was just like, this is so hard. It's a very good story, though. It's a little long, I'll admit, considering it only takes place over the course of a week, a little less. So it's very very long for that, or it felt very long for that because I listened to the audiobook, but I'm glad I did finally listen to it. I do think that the author did a good job, you know, setting the scene, giving you these characters. And even though it was a little disconcerting sometimes to obviously like hear all of this rendered in English and with such a little bit more of a refined vocabulary, which is not exactly what you would anticipate from the setting and the characters, it made sense just considering obviously this author is trying to tell a story and some things need to be sacrificed in order to get the heart of it to come through, and I think at the end of the day that is exactly what she managed to accomplish, so kudos to her for that. The last two books I'm going to talk about are both from Berkeley, and they are both adult fiction. So the first is People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. This is about two best friends, Poppy and Alex. Every year since the first year that they met as freshmen in college, they go on a week-long summer vacation together, and they try to go to different places and do different things, except that 2 years ago they went on a vacation and something happened and they haven't really spoken since then. Poppy is having sort of a crisis in her life where she's not sure what she really wants anymore, and she tries to remember the last time she was really happy, like really content with everything, and she realizes it was on that vacation 2 years ago. So she somehow magically manages to convince Alex to take a vacation with her in order for her to be able to fix whatever went wrong between them. And I love this story. I normally don't go for friends to lover stories, but I really like the way this one was done. I think it was because we'd seen their friendship being portrayed in the past snippets, because the author does go back and forth between the past and the present. I think it's because she was able to give us the past where it's really just about their friendship.
Right.
And then you sort of see the developing feelings coming in later, and that sort of back and forth really worked for me. I also really like that there was a traveling aspect to the story, because, you know, I'm a sucker for traveling stories, especially since we haven't been able to go anywhere like too grand recently. I think she did a great job with that, especially with the variety of things and experiences that they get up to, including the things that go wrong, of which there are quite a few.
There we go.
It was just really nice to read another Emily Henry adult contemporary sort of romance story, and to read one that was very different from her last book. In this one, the characters have an established relationship. They liked each other. They were best friends, you know, and then something just tore them apart. I like the fact that it's not only about that, but it's also about the two of them trying to come to terms with what they are willing to do or willing to have, and if their relationship is worth, you know, fighting for those things. And it was just really sweet, and I really enjoyed reading it a lot.
Agreed.
The last book, however, I call this the shenanigan book. I actually got one of my sisters and my cousin to read it, because I was like, someone else needs to enjoy the ridiculousness of this book with me.
Tell the people why.
Dial for Aunties by Jessie Q. Sutanto is literally the most ridiculous set of circumstances that I will ever encounter in a book, at least this year for sure. And yet it somehow all worked really well. The premise of this one is that the main character, Madeline, goes on a blind date with someone. Guy kind of gets handsy, she tases the dude, they end up crashing the car, and he's dead. Panicking, she drives home, tells her mother calls in her aunties, and they all sit around discussing, you know, how to hide this dead body. So they come up with a plan, and the plan's perfect, except when the cooler that they store the dead body in gets shipped to the island where they're supposed to be for this gigantic billionaire's wedding that's happening in a weekend. And so they have to go to the island, try to hide the dead body, and it is literally a book where it's like shenanigan after shenanigan after shenanigan, and I enjoyed it so much. I just think that I went into this one knowing it was going to be ridiculous. Like, That premise alone
I mean,
is like over the
come
top.
on.
And yet it all just came together beautifully. I sometimes read things just to be entertained, and this book was so entertaining. I was just cackling for a lot of it, and Maki would hear my commentary because I'd just be like, do you know what they did next? Do you know what happened next?
I enjoyed the vicarious like reading of it.
Yeah, I like that. This was really about Medi and her family. So you really get to see how she and her family are under pressure. You kind of get to know every single one of the aunt and her mom. You kind of see like how their dynamic works, especially in the context of we need to work together to hide this dead body, but we're not working together because we each have opinions. So it's kind of great. There's also a romance in this story, a second chance romance, and I also thought that was sweet too, but for me the main charm and heart of the story is really Medi and her aunt and just everything they're doing in order to A, do their job at this wedding, and B, make sure the dead body does not get pinned on Medi. It's a fun ride. I was thoroughly entertained. I definitely think this is the perfect beach read. Like, this is the kind of book you want to sit by the beach or the pool and just devour in one sitting. So definitely check it out. That's the end of this particular What We Read episode. We hope you enjoyed it. If you've got any thoughts on any of the books or the comics that we mentioned in the video, feel free to leave a comment, like and subscribe. You can check out all our social media links down below, and we'll see you guys with a new video soon. Bye!